Drew McIntyre just said something that might have shifted the entire direction of SmackDown, and we're breaking down exactly what this means for his character, his future, and the ongoing war with the Samoan family on WWE Express. When a guy like Drew McIntyre goes on record with language that blunt, that personal, that cutting, it's not random. It's not just a moment of anger. It's a calculated statement about who he is and what he's willing to say to get under someone's skin. Think about Drew's journey over the past year. He's been positioned as a fighter, a guy who speaks his mind, who doesn't back down from confrontation. But there's a difference between being tough and crossing into territory that makes you look like you're losing control. And that's the tightrope Drew is walking right now. The Samoan family, particularly the bloodline, thrives on this idea of respect, hierarchy, and consequences. They've built their entire empire on making people understand that disrespect has a cost. When Drew steps into that space and deliberately disrespects them with language that goes beyond typical wrestling trash talk, he's not just starting an argument. He's declaring war in a way that eliminates any possibility of reconciliation. These are the kinds of words that stick with people. These are the kinds of words that demand payback. What's fascinating from a character perspective is understanding what Drew gains from this moment and what he risks losing. On the surface, he comes across as a warrior willing to stand alone against overwhelming odds. The Scottish warrior versus the family dynasty is compelling storytelling, but there's danger here too. Drew essentially took the high ground he held and willingly surrendered it. He moved the conversation from his strength, his wrestling ability and his toughness, to his mouth. And in that shift, he gave the bloodline ammunition. Roman Reigns and the bloodline don't need to use inflammatory language because their dominance speaks louder than words. They've built an image of controlled power, of people who don't have to shout about their superiority because it's self-evident. Drew, by contrast, just screamed into the void. He made this personal in a way that suggests he might be losing ground psychologically. When you start throwing around words like that, it's often because you're desperate, because you feel like you're running out of legitimate arguments, because you need to shock people into paying attention to you instead of just respecting you. The fallout from this statement will likely come in stages. First, the bloodline will respond, and their response won't be defensive. They'll be calculated. They'll likely make Drew pay for this in tangible ways. A match where he's outgunned. A situation where he's isolated from allies. The bloodline is too smart to just retaliate blindly. They'll use this moment to paint Drew as someone unstable, someone who can't control his emotions, someone whose judgment is compromised by rage. That's far more damaging than any physical retaliation because it challenges his credibility as a leader and competitor. But here's where it gets deeper from a narrative standpoint. There's a possibility that Drew made this statement because he knows he's already losing. Maybe the backstage politics of the situation have shifted. Maybe he's being marginalized and he's throwing this out as a last stand. Maybe he's trying to create enough chaos that it forces the company's hand to protect him or give him something bigger. In professional wrestling, sometimes the most reckless statements come from people who feel like they have nothing left to lose. The other fascinating angle is what this says about Drew's evolution as a character. He came back to WWE after his departure with this idea of reclaiming his spot, of proving that he belonged at the top of the card. For a while, that story worked. But the reality is that the bloodline's gravity is so strong that it pulls everything toward them. If you're not part of their sphere or directly benefiting from challenging them, you're essentially in an orbit that slowly decays. Drew might be realizing that he can't beat them with respectability. He can't beat them with traditional wrestling excellence because they've created an environment where that doesn't matter anymore. Using language that blunt might be Drew's way of signaling that he's ready to enter their world, ready to match their intensity and their viciousness. But the problem with that strategy is that the bloodline didn't get where they are by being outclassed in intensity. If Drew wants to prove he can go toe-to-toe with them on that level, he's entering a competition where they've already established dominance. He's essentially given them permission to be exactly as brutal as they want to be, and he can't complain about it because he opened that door. The community will have strong opinions about this moment. Some will see Drew as a hero willing to stand up and speak truth to power. Others will see him as someone who lost his composure and damaged his own credibility. That division is valuable from a storytelling perspective because it means this statement accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish. It polarizes. It creates conversation. It makes people choose sides. Moving forward, the question becomes whether Drew doubles down or walks this back. Does he lean into being the guy willing to get dirty and say what others won't? Or does he try to rehabilitate his image and position himself as the rational warrior who was provoked? If he doubles down, we're entering a phase where this becomes less about wrestling excellence and more about personal vendetta. If he walks it back, he looks weak, like he said something in the moment he didn't mean. The bloodline, by contrast, has options here. They can let this become the sole focus of their feud with Drew, turning this moment into the reason they destroy him. Or they can transcend it, move past the words and focus on the competition itself. Given their character development, I think they move past it. They acknowledge it, they probably address it with some cutting promos, but they don't let it define the rivalry. because that's what being truly dominant looks like. You don't get hung up on someone's words, you just beat them. What Drew's statement does accomplish is making the stakes feel real. This isn't just professional disagreement anymore. This isn't the typical wrestling narrative of two competitors fighting for supremacy. Drew crossed into emotional territory. He made it about character, about respect, about family. And when you do that in professional wrestling, you're essentially saying you're willing to risk everything to prove your point. That's compelling drama. That's the kind of moment that people remember, that leads to matches people want to see because the tension is undeniable. If you're watching this unfold, keep your eyes on how the bloodline responds, because their response will tell us everything about where this story is headed. Will they elevate Drew by treating this as a legitimate threat? Will they diminish him by brushing it aside? Will they use it as a tool to cement their dominance? The answer to those questions will shape the next chapter of both their stories. What's your take on Drew's statement? Do you think he crossed the line, or do you think he said what needed to be said? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Hit that like button to support the kind of deep character analysis WWE Express is known for, and subscribe so you never miss our breakdowns of the psychological storytelling that makes professional wrestling the greatest form of entertainment. Thanks for watching WWE Express.